Thank you for coming out and listening to somebody who is not running for president of the United States. One of the few people who is not running for president. Did you hear there's like 350 people running for president? From the Republican Party, the Democrat Party, Independent parties, all different kinds of libertarian parties. I even heard there was one who was running from the birthday party. That's true. KRNG. You know what their motto is, the birthday party? Let them eat cake.
Oh boy.
No, I am just an engineering professor. I have a few other titles too, but I've been teaching engineering at Oral Roberts University for 23 years now. And I feel a sense of calling to that university. I feel like God brought me there. I was an aerospace engineer out in Southern California for several years at Hughes Aircraft Company, working on satellite dynamics and control systems. But that's fun. That's really fun. But it's a lot more fun to work with young people, work with students at Oral Roberts University. We get great students there. Our engineering program is growing now. We have about 150 students in our engineering program there. We have a general engineering degree with concentrations in mechanical, electrical, or computer engineering. We have biomedical engineering and engineering physics as well. But a few years back, I've always had an interest in science and faith ever since I would talk to my colleagues at Hughes Aircraft to see if I could draw them into a relationship with the Lord Jesus by expressing to them how the universe and how their interest in engineering and science displays the glory of God, as it says in the Scriptures. And so I'm going to get into that tonight. But a few years ago, as I was thinking about this, as I was teaching at ORU, I thought, Christian young people today really need a little bit more to help them see the connections between science and faith. There's some confusion in the church today in this area. And so I began to think, it's always called a dialogue, science and faith, but really it should involve more conversation partners from many different areas, including engineering. And I think the field of engineering has something important to contribute to this conversation, not just a dialogue between two parties, but more of a conversation. It is a part of a project that I have a grant for from the BioLogos Foundation. And the title of this project is Science and the Wisdom of God, helping Christians understand origins and helping them appreciate the ingenuity that we see in nature. And so I've added recently, it's not just science and the wisdom of God, but science, engineering, and the wisdom of God. And as I said, this was a grant from the BioLogos Foundation, a 4-year grant to make presentations like this one. And I do need to offer a disclaimer now. I don't know if you're familiar with the BioLogos Foundation. They are a group of Christians, evangelical Christians, who desire to show the harmony between mainstream science and Christianity. But it sounds a whole lot like Reasons to Believe, doesn't it? But they have one important difference from Reasons to Believe. Does anybody know? Anybody familiar with the BioLogos Foundation? What would be the difference?
They believe in evolution.
They would say that the evidence is very strong that there is a material continuity from the first life to life today. So they would adhere to common ancestry and common descent. That's really the area right now in science and faith that we wrestle with as Christians. Even my president at our university is very nervous about me going out and talking about evolution among other groups. But I think as Christians we need to have these conversations, and you know that Reasons to Believe is currently in dialogue with the BioLogos Foundation and their scholars, and they're having a very fruitful dialogue, even though they don't see eye to eye on the evolution issue. And I think as Christians we can use that as a model, an example, with the different groups that we interact with. I have friends that are younger creationists, I have friends that are older creationists, I have friends that are theistic evolutionists. And I think part of the thing God is calling me to in my ministry is as a peacemaker among these groups. Now, certainly we need to be careful that we are holding tightly to the truth, but we have to discern, what really constitutes heresy, and we have to agree that there's some uncertainty with regard to exactly how and exactly when God created mankind, for example, and everything. So that's part of my message is we as Christians, I think, need to learn how to be comfortable with some amount of uncertainty on these issues. And I'm writing a book right now called Hacking the Cosmos, so I'm about halfway through it, and I hope to get it published by next year on how engineering helps science and the humanities in making sense of the universe. So I'm going to start with a short introduction, then I'm going to give a short summary of the dialogue, the current dialogue going on in science and faith, and the potential for engineering to contribute to that conversation. And I'm going to introduce a new term you might not have heard before, but this is brand new in the engineering design research called affordances. And I'll define that for you and show how I believe this concept of affordances in nature justifies the hypothesis, at least, of an engineered universe. And even will lead us to an idea of not just theism, the belief in that there is a God, but it resonates strongly with a particular version of theism that we know as Christian theism. And if the universe is in fact engineered, then perhaps the best way to explore this universe is by reverse engineering. Now, reverse engineering is simply dissecting something, taking it apart, analyzing it with an engineering mindset to understand the connections among all the parts and just realize how it works, why it works, and what was in the mind of the original engineer who was designing this.
Question.
Sure.
Is an engineered universe something that opposes evolution?
Not necessarily. Because, and I'm going to get into that, it's a great question, I'm going to get into that more, so I'll answer it briefly here and then I'll answer it more completely later on. But the argument from reverse engineering basically looks at the present state of nature. And that is kind of independent of exactly how it came about, right? But when you look at the mainstream science story of stellar evolution and chemical elements being generated within the interior of stars, and all this kind of mainstream science process, I think it does resonate with old Earth creationism. And but as far as how much God used the process of evolution, adaptation, it's still an open question right now in my mind. And then finally, I want to, if we have time, show how I believe this kind of analysis and the invitational nature of affordances in the natural realm resonate with God's redemptive plan and our trusting of a Redeemer in the person of Jesus Christ. So, a brief introduction first. Did you hear what one sock puppet said to the other sock puppet? Seems like there's an unseen hand behind everything you do. So you can't get away from the philosophy, and so much of this discussion gets stopped when people say, well, that's not science, intelligent design is not science, let's stick to the science. Well, if you want to play that game, you can just stick to science, but you are very much limited then in what you can discover, what you can talk about. And the most difficult problems today, it is recognized now, require a multidisciplinary approach. In other words, we need everybody from all different fields of human knowledge and experience contributing what they know from their field to help us answer the big questions. We're not going to get it all from just science. So I think we need to get beyond this demarcation of what exactly is science, what's not science, what's philosophy.
I enjoy how science proves what we believe in faith. And I enjoy how anthropology and archaeology proves. I've seen parts of Dead Sea Scrolls, like a lot of people have. They go Hobby Lobby, and that's fun to go, wow, I can see that. But getting this far in depth into it, while I find it fascinating, in the back of my mind, I find myself thinking that you're just supposed to have faith.
Right. And
so why?
You used the word there, prove. I heard that among somebody else tonight too. And as an engineer or mathematician, scientist myself, I'm uncomfortable with that word prove, because from a mathematic perspective, that means a compelling, line-by-line deduction of a result that must necessarily follow from premises or evidences. And if we're honest with ourselves in Christianity, that's not really what we have with regard to the existence of God. Now, Romans 1:20 is getting a little bit ahead here, but Romans 1:20 says that everybody knows there is a Creator through an understanding of what has been made. And I believe the Bible, I believe that's true. But just because we know things doesn't mean we can prove things one person to another in this kind of a compelling manner. And I think that's the way God engineered it, in order that we would be able to enter into a true love relationship with Him. Because a love relationship requires trust and faith. It kind of ruins it if I ask my wife to say, "Prove that you love me," doesn't it? So I think it makes a lot of sense that God would do it this way.
I would argue too that you almost need faith to do science anyways, because you have
That's
the scientist has faith that the laws of nature are
That's
what
exactly
they will
right.
be. So if the scientist didn't have faith,
That's right.
then he would just be unknowingly doing experiments over nothing. So
Very
the
good
scientists
point.
have faith that the laws are going to do what they say.
Very good point. Yes. So we get this picture from the media of a warfare between science and faith, religious faith, right? But it's actually, I don't think it's quite as bad as it's painted. Because a recent survey was done at Rice University down in Texas that showed that 70% of U.S. evangelicals do not view religion and science as being in conflict. 48% view science and religion as complementary. That is, they help each other. They provide information that's good in thinking about the other discipline. 76% of U.S. scientists identify with a religious tradition. Many scientists would tell us that most scientists are atheists. That's not true. And many more engineers. Actually, there's a high percentage of engineers who are believers than scientists. But even scientists, most scientists identify with a religious tradition. So what's the current dialogue in science and faith like? Well, it is a lot of conflict. There's issues that we don't know about, and it's because we're flawed human beings. None of our interpretations, whether it be of the Bible or whether it be of nature and the data that we collect from nature, are perfect interpretations, are they? We make mistakes, and so when we compare those two interpretations as we do in science and religion, we shouldn't expect that we get a perfect agreement. I think that engineering has a role to play in this dialogue. And one of my students, Wyatt Bullard, an art major at ORU, made a little graphic here to demonstrate this. A while back, it's the 1950s, when C.P. Snow wrote a book called The Two Cultures. And he was talking about science and the humanities. Now, the humanities are things like religion, art, anything that's of interest to human beings in a more of a non-technical way. And he wrote that these two cultures, science and the humanities, have a horrible time communicating with each other. They use different languages, and this is really hurting our attempt to solve some of the big problems in the world. And others suggested that the social sciences could help out in this way to try to bring some reconciliation. But I think that engineering has an important role to play in helping science and the humanities together. By the way, does anybody recognize that setting there? Does anybody recognize those people?
Seinfeld.
It is. That's Seinfeld's apartment. Very good. Who said that? You win the prize. Could you use an ultimate disc?
Oh, yeah, always. Thanks, sir.